I couldn't believe that I was so full of Catholic guilt that I actually believed the nun who was my caseworker at Angel Guardian, who had told me that I probably would never be able to adopt a baby again. Early in 1971, before Michael was even born, I received a letter from St. Peter's saying they would have a baby for me. It would take about a year, and that they would be in touch. Well, needless to say, I was ecstatic. They had asked me to reach out to Angel Guardian because they wanted to work with them to finalize the adoption. Angel Guardian was not terribly happy to work with me, and it took a lot of pleading on my part, and they finally said they would do it, but with a caveat that they were sure I would not be able to adopt a healthy baby. And so Michael was born on June 20th, unbeknownst to me. And that summer, my husband and I had taken the boys for a 2-week vacation up to the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. When we got home, the phone was ringing furiously, and when I picked it up, my caseworker at St. Peter's was on the other end saying, "Where were you? We've been trying to call you for 2 weeks. We didn't know what happened to you." Of course, there were no answering machines back in the day. So we discussed the legalities and what they had to know. And at the end of the conversation, my caseworker said, "Now we have to discuss something. There is a slight problem, and I don't know if you're addressing it." The word problem just triggered problems with Grace, and I kept saying, "Is Michael healthy?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "What's the problem?" And she said, "He's a boy." And I said, "But is he healthy?" And she said, "Yes, he's a boy." And after a few rounds of that, I said, "Well, what is the problem?" And she said, "You have 2 sons. We were assuming you would have liked a daughter." And I said, "No, whatever God gives me, that's who I'll be happy with." So I went into overdrive. I wallpapered Michael's room in a weekend, and it was quite a big room, so it really took a lot of time by the time I wallpapered it and painted the trim and cleaned the floor and discussed with my boys if they wanted to change their bedrooms, because Michael's room was going to be the biggest of the boys' bedrooms. Tommy was very happy with his room at the end of the hall. Bobby, it was difficult to cajole him into getting out of his crib. And looking back, if I was the person I am now, I would have just bought another crib for Michael. But I talked Bobby into going to a big boy's bed, which was a big mistake for me. And Bobby refused to give up his room, which was the smallest of the bedrooms. And so Michael ended up with the best bedroom, a really sunny, beautiful bedroom. Bobby, I hadn't realized what would happen with Bobby being able to get up in the middle of the night and walk around. One night I found him trying to fill the bathtub up with water, and if it wasn't for my collie Holly barking, I would have probably slept through it. A few nights later, Bobby was attempting to climb the railing to climb onto the chandelier. I guess he was going to swing from it. So after much talking with Bobby, I told him that if he didn't stay in his bedroom, I was going to have to lock the door. And it was not something I wanted to do. And there were a lot of midnight escapades. And finally, I said to Bobby, Mommy's going to have to lock the door. So I asked my husband when he came home if he would just reverse the lock so that I could lock it from the outside. And it was, again, not something I wanted to do, but I just didn't know how to keep Bobby safe. So that weekend went by, and on Monday morning, Tommy was off to school, and Michael was in his little baby seat in the kitchen, and I was making Bobby's bed, and he shut the door, which was not unusual. And I looked out the window and I watched my neighbors going to work or school or whatever. And when I went to get out of Bobby's room, I couldn't. The door was locked. And Bobby had this big smile on his face and he said, Mommy, I locked us in. Now, Bobby had locked me in the basement. He locked me in a lot of places. So I always carried hairpins in my hair, and I was very adept at picking the locks. Well, I worked on this lock for hours, and I watched the last of my neighbors leave, and I was waiting for Tommy to come home from school, and I always waited at the stop sign for him. And finally, I realized that when Tony changed the lock, there was evidently a hole, and he put the hole over the wrong screw or something like that, and I just had to turn it. And I finally got us out. Bobby was extremely disappointed, and I was extremely happy. Michael had had a really good nap, and it was just in time to go meet Tommy. So all's well that ends well, I think.